Story 1. The Christmas Eve Delivery. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been driving long-haul routes for 16 years. I've seen every kind of weather, every type of road condition, and delivered to places so remote they don't show up on most GPS systems. But nothing in all those years prepared me for what happened on Christmas Eve 2019 when I took a supposedly simple delivery run through the mountains of West Virginia. The job came through at the last minute. My dispatcher, Karen, called me at 6 p.m. on December 23rd, apologetic but desperate. Another driver had called in sick and they needed someone to transport a load of Christmas decorations and toys to a distribution center in a town called Shepherd's Hollow. The pay was triple the usual rate for holiday work, and the route was straightforward, or so the manifest claimed. I'd be driving through the night, delivering by dawn on Christmas Eve, and back home in time to spend Christmas Day with my wife and daughters. I should have questioned why they were paying so much for such a simple run. The warehouse where I picked up the load was nearly deserted. A single worker, an older man with watery eyes and a nervous disposition, helped me verify the cargo. 20 pallets of Christmas merchandise, all properly secured and documented. But as he closed the trailer doors, he grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Don't stop between here and Shepherd's Hollow," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, just keep driving." I laughed it off as holiday superstition. The old man probably spent too much time alone in that warehouse, letting his imagination run wild. I climbed into my cab, a 2018 Peterbilt 579 that I'd driven over 400,000 miles, and pulled out onto Route 33 heading east. The first 3 hours were uneventful. Light snow began falling around 9 p.m., nothing my rig couldn't handle. The CB radio crackled occasionally with other drivers exchanging Christmas greetings and traffic updates. I passed through small towns decorated with lights and inflatable Santas, their main streets empty as families gathered inside warm homes. Around midnight, I turned onto Highway 28, a smaller route that would cut through the Monongahela National Forest. My GPS showed the road as a direct line to Shepherd's Hollow, saving me nearly an hour. The snow was falling heavier now, and the road narrowed to 2 lanes winding through dense forest. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating walls of pine trees on either side. That's when I first noticed something odd. My dashboard clock, which had always kept perfect time, seemed to be running slow. I glanced at my phone, 12:47 a.m. I looked back at the dashboard, 12:31 a.m. I figured it was just a dead battery in the clock, but something about the discrepancy made me uneasy. The CB radio had gone quiet. No chatter, no static, just dead silence. I tried adjusting the channels, but every frequency was blank. My phone showed no signal, which wasn't unusual in these mountains, but the complete communication blackout felt wrong. I'd been driving for another 20 minutes when I saw the figure standing beside the road. At first, I thought it was a deer. The shape was roughly the right size, standing motionless at the edge of my headlight beams. But as I got closer, I realized it was a person, a woman in a white dress, no coat despite the freezing temperature and falling snow. She wasn't hitchhiking or waving for help. She was just standing there, perfectly still, watching my truck approach. I remembered the warehouse worker's warning, "Don't stop." But every instinct screamed at me that leaving someone stranded in this weather was a death sentence. I eased on the brakes, slowing down to get a better look. The woman's dress was old-fashioned, like something from the 1940s or 50s. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and even from inside my cab I could see she was barefoot in the snow. But what made my blood run cold was her face, or rather the expression on it. She was smiling, but it wasn't a smile asking for help. It was knowing, almost predatory. As my truck rolled past her, she turned her head to follow my movement, that smile never wavering. I watched her in my side mirror, and I swear she didn't blink once. Then, impossibly, she was gone. Not walking away, not running, just gone. Vanished between one moment and the next. I pressed harder on the accelerator, my hands gripping the steering wheel tight enough to make my knuckles white. The logical part of my brain tried to rationalize it. Poor visibility, exhaustion, shadows playing tricks. But I knew what I'd seen. The road ahead seemed to stretch forever, an endless corridor of snow and darkness. I checked my GPS, still 40 miles to Shepherd's Hollow. But I'd been driving for over an hour since entering the forest, and according to my calculations, I should have covered at least 60 miles by now. That's when I saw the second figure. This one was a man in a dark suit, standing in the same spot where I'd seen the woman. The exact same spot, even though I'd been driving steadily forward for 15 minutes. He wore no coat, no hat, and like the woman, he was smiling, that same unsettling smile. I didn't slow down this time. I kept my speed steady at 55 miles per hour, watching him pass by in my peripheral vision. But in my rearview mirror, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The woman was back, standing on the opposite side of the road behind me. And as I watched, more figures began to appear. Men, women, children, all dressed in clothing from different eras, all standing motionless in the snow, all wearing that horrible smile. My CB radio suddenly crackled to life, but instead of voices, it was playing music. Silent Night in a scratchy, ancient recording like something from an old vinyl record. But the lyrics were wrong. The melody was right, but the words were backwards, a phonetic reversal that sent chills down my spine. I reached to turn it off, and that's when I noticed my dashboard clock. It read 12:31 a.m., the exact same time I'd seen nearly 45 minutes ago. The forest around me seemed to press closer, the trees bending toward the road at unnatural angles. My headlights flickered, and for a brief moment I saw something else. The road ahead wasn't a road at all, but a path through a cemetery. Hundreds of gravestones lined both sides, many topped with Christmas wreaths and decorations. Then my light steadied, and it was just a road again. But now there were figures standing directly on the pavement ahead. I laid on the horn, the blast echoing through the forest, but they didn't move. There were 5 of them spread across both lanes, blocking my path. I had seconds to make a decision: brake and risk losing all momentum in the snow, or maintain speed and pray they'd move. They didn't move. I gripped the wheel and prepared for impact, closing my eyes at the last second. But there was no collision, no sound of bodies hitting the truck. I opened my eyes to find the road empty. The figures had vanished, and I was still rolling forward through the snow. But something had changed. The snow was falling upward now, flakes rising from the ground toward the black sky. The pine trees were moving, swaying and bending despite the lack of wind, their branches reaching toward my truck like grasping fingers. And the road itself seemed to ripple beneath my wheels, as if I were driving across water rather than asphalt. My trailer began to shake, not the normal vibration of driving over rough pavement, but violent, rhythmic impacts like something inside was trying to get out. I remembered the cargo, Christmas decorations and toys, but what if that wasn't what I was really carrying? The CB radio erupted with voices, dozens of them all speaking at once. They were calling my name, Marcus, over and over, but in different tones and accents. Some sounded pleading, others angry, still others gleeful. And beneath it all, I could hear children singing Christmas carols in that same backwards phonetic pattern. I looked at my GPS. The screen was glitching, showing my truck's position jumping randomly across the map. 1 second I was on Highway 28. The next I was in a town I'd never heard of. Then out in the middle of the forest with no roads at all. The estimated arrival time kept changing, sometimes showing I'd arrive in 10 minutes, sometimes 10 hours, sometimes displaying dates years in the past or future. The figures were everywhere now, lining both sides of the road, packed shoulder to shoulder as far as I could see. They were no longer standing still. They were walking, keeping perfect pace with my truck despite my speed, their heads all turned toward me, all wearing those terrible smiles. Then I saw the children. They were standing in a circle in the middle of the road, holding hands around something I couldn't quite make out. They looked like they were playing a game, Ring Around the Rosie or some similar childhood activity. But their movements were too synchronized, too mechanical. And they were all dressed in old-fashioned winter clothes, the kind of coats and hats kids might have worn 70 or 80 years ago. As I got closer, I saw what they were circling. It was a Christmas tree, but wrong. The ornaments were moving, writhing on the branches. And at the top, instead of a star or an angel, there was something that might have been a head. Human or animal, I couldn't tell. I swerved to avoid them, my trailer fishtailing on the snowy road. For a terrifying moment, I thought I was going to jackknife. But the tires caught traction and I straightened out. When I checked my mirror, the children were gone, but the tree was still there, receding in the distance, its ornaments still moving. My phone suddenly rang, the sound so unexpected in the silence that I nearly drove off the road. I grabbed it without thinking, seeing home on the caller ID. My wife. "Marcus?" Her voice sounded distant, echoing. "Where are you? You were supposed to be home yesterday." "Yesterday, Karen? It's Christmas Eve. I'm on a delivery run." "Marcus, it's December 27th. You've been gone for 4 days. We've been looking everywhere for you." I looked at my dashboard clock. Still 12:31 a.m. But my phone showed December 27th, 3:47 p.m. "That's impossible," I said. "I left the warehouse 8 hours ago." "8 hours, Marcus? You left on December 23rd. No one has heard from you since." "Where are you?" Before I could answer, the call dropped. I tried calling back, but my phone had no signal again. But I'd seen the date, seen the timestamp. 4 days. I'd lost 4 days somehow, or I was about to lose them, or time itself had stopped making sense on this road. The trailer was shaking harder now, the impacts coming faster and more violent. I heard metal groaning, the sound of pallets shifting despite the straps holding them down. And underneath it all, a sound that made my blood freeze, scratching. Something with claws dragging across the metal interior of my trailer. I should have stopped. I should have pulled over, called for help, waited for daylight. But the warehouse worker's warning echoed in my mind. Don't stop. And besides, what good would stopping do? Whatever was happening, whatever I'd driven into, stopping would only make me a stationary target. A new sound joined the cacophony, sleigh bells. Clear and bright, jingling merrily, coming from somewhere above my truck. I looked up through the windshield and saw nothing but darkness and falling snow. But the bells were getting louder, closer, accompanied now by the sound of hooves on pavement. Something landed on my roof. The impact made the entire truck shudder. I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, walking from the back of my trailer toward the cab. Each step dented the metal roof, leaving visible depressions that I could track across the ceiling of my cab. Whatever was up there, it was massive. It stopped directly above my head. For a long moment, there was silence except for the engine and the wind. Then something began to scrape across the roof. Long, slow drags of something sharp against metal. It was writing something, carving letters into my roof, and even though I couldn't see them, I somehow knew what they spelled. "Merry Christmas, Marcus." The CB radio exploded with static, and through the noise a voice, deep, resonant, and utterly wrong, began to speak. "You're late with your delivery, Marcus. The children have been waiting. They're so eager to play with their new toys. Won't you bring them in? Won't you stay for Christmas?" "I don't know where Shepherd's Hollow is," I shouted at the radio. "My GPS is broken. Just tell me how to get out of here." The voice laughed, a sound like grinding stone. But Marcus, you're already here. You've been here for days, don't you understand? Shepherd's Hollow isn't a place you drive to. It's a place you arrive at when you're called. And we've been calling you for such a long time. The road ahead began to change. The trees pulled back and I found myself driving through a town. But it was wrong, all wrong. The buildings were decorated for Christmas, lights strung across every surface, but they were ancient structures, wood and stone from a century ago or more. The streets were empty except for the figures, hundreds of them now, all standing perfectly still, all watching my truck pass. In the center of town was a massive Christmas tree, easily 50 feet tall, decorated with those same writhing ornaments. And beneath it I saw the pallets. My pallets, the cargo from my trailer, already unloaded and opened. The children were there, dozens of them, pulling out toys and decorations. But the toys were moving on their own, crawling across the snow like living things. I looked at my GPS one more time. It showed my location clearly now. Shepherd's Hollow, West Virginia. Arrival time 12:31 a.m. December 24th, 2019, right on schedule. But as I watched, the date began to change. December 24th, 1984, December 24th, 1959, December 24th, 1923. Scrolling backwards through time each Christmas Eve, and I understood with sickening clarity what this place was. Not a town that existed in space, but in time. A moment that repeated every year, collecting travelers like me who took the wrong road, made the wrong turn, accepted the wrong delivery. The thing on my roof climbed down, moving around to hang in front of my windshield. I saw it clearly for the first time and wished I hadn't. It wore red, but the red was wrong, too dark, too wet. Its face was obscured by shadow and a beard that moved like living things, and its eyes, there were too many eyes scattered across its face in no pattern that made sense. It pointed toward the Christmas tree, its gesture clear. Park. Unload. Join us. I made a decision then, one that defied logic and reason. I slammed my foot down on the accelerator, pushing my truck to speeds dangerous for these conditions. The thing on my hood screamed, a sound that shattered my windshield, but I kept going. I aimed straight for that Christmas tree, for the center of whatever ritual or reality this place represented. The figures began to move, rushing toward my truck from all directions. The children scattered. The thing on my hood dug its claws into the metal, trying to hold on. But I didn't slow down. I hit the tree at 60 miles per hour. There was no impact, no crash. Instead, there was light. Brilliant, searing white light that filled my entire vision. I heard screaming, felt my truck spinning, tumbling through space or time or whatever existed in that impossible place. The light consumed everything. When I opened my eyes, I was parked on the shoulder of Highway 28, 3 miles outside a town called Riverside. My windshield was intact. My dashboard clock read 6:15 a.m. December 24th. My trailer was still attached, still sealed. According to my GPS, I'd somehow traveled 87 miles forward from my last known position. My phone had signal. 53 missed calls from my wife, from my dispatcher, from numbers I didn't recognize, all time-stamped across 4 days, just like Karen had said. December 23rd through December 27th. But for me, only 6 hours had passed. I got out and checked my trailer. The seals were broken, the doors slightly ajar. Inside, the pallets were there, but they'd been disturbed. The cargo was partially unwrapped, toys and decorations scattered across the floor. And on several of the boxes, written in what looked like soot or ash, were the words, "Thank you for the delivery." My roof had scratches, deep gouges in the metal spelling out that message. "Merry Christmas, Marcus. They're still there. I've never had them repaired." I called my dispatcher. She cried when she heard my voice, said they'd been about to file a missing persons report. I told her I'd had GPS and phone problems but completed the delivery. She said that was impossible. Shepherd's Hollow had closed its distribution center in 1987. The address on my manifest didn't exist. I drove home that morning, arriving just before noon on Christmas Eve. My family was overjoyed to see me, though confused by my insistence that I'd only been gone one night. The calendar proved them right, proved I'd lost 4 days somehow. But I remember every minute of that one night, and those minutes contained eternities. I still drive long haul. It's what I know, what I'm good at. But I never take routes through Monongahela National Forest, never accept last-minute holiday deliveries, and I always trust my instincts when something feels wrong about a job. Because somewhere in those mountains on certain Christmas Eves, a town exists that shouldn't. A town where time loops and folds, where the inhabitants wait, with patient hunger for travelers like me. A town that calls itself Shepherd's Hollow, where Christmas never ends and visitors are always welcome. I delivered their cargo, I paid their toll with 4 days of my life. And every December 24th at exactly 12:31 a.m., my CB radio crackles with static, and through the noise I hear sleigh bells and children singing carols in reverse, reminding me that some debts are never fully paid. Story 2. The Snow Globe Collector. My name is Jennifer Hartley, and before December of 2021, I thought I understood the world. I'd been driving a box truck for a small auction house in Vermont for 7 years, transporting antiques and estate sale items across New England. It was steady work, and I'd seen every kind of strange object people collect. Vintage medical equipment, taxidermied animals, dolls that looked like they belonged in horror movies. None of it ever bothered me. Objects are just objects, I used to tell myself. They don't have power beyond what we give them. I was wrong. The job came through on December 18th, an estate sale in a town called Whitmore, Massachusetts. Population 3,200, one of those places where everyone knows everyone and outsiders are noticed immediately. The deceased was a woman named Margaret Frost, age 89, who'd lived alone in a Victorian house on the edge of town for over 60 years. She'd been a recluse, according to my boss, Francis, who'd handled the initial estate assessment. No living relatives, no close friends, just decades of accumulated possessions. "There's one particular collection I need you to transport separately," Francis told me, sounding unusually tense. She collected snow globes, over 2,000 of them displayed in custom cabinets throughout the house. The family lawyer wants them cataloged and moved to our facility for appraisal. 2,000 snow globes. It seemed excessive, but not particularly unusual. Collectors often fixated on single categories, accumulating far beyond reason or taste. I loaded my truck with bubble wrap, boxes, and custom padding, then made the 3-hour drive to Whitmore. I arrived at the Frost House around 2 p.m. It was a massive structure, 3 stories of Victorian excess painted a faded gray-blue with a tower room on the northwest corner that reminded me of something from a Gothic novel. The windows were dark despite the afternoon sun, and the property was surrounded by tall pines that blocked most of the natural light. The lawyer, a nervous man named Pemberton, met me at the front door. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and a slight tremor in his hands. "Thank God you're here," he said, ushering me inside. "I've been trying to catalog everything myself, but I can't spend another night in this house." The interior was exactly what I expected from an elderly recluse. Heavy furniture, faded wallpaper, the musty smell of a house that hadn't had proper ventilation in years. But what struck me immediately was the snow globes. They were everywhere. On every surface, every shelf, lining the hallway, covering the mantel, arranged in floor-to-ceiling cabinets in every room. Thousands of them, each containing its own miniature scene. "She started collecting them after her daughter died," Pemberton explained, leading me through the first floor. "That was 1963. Car accident on Christmas Day. Margaret never recovered. She became obsessed with snow globes, said they were windows to better worlds where tragedy didn't exist. I began photographing and cataloging, working methodically through each room. The snow globes were remarkably diverse. Some were standard Christmas scenes, Santa's workshop, ice skating ponds, village squares. Others were more unusual, Victorian street scenes, medieval castles, sailing ships on frozen seas. Many appeared to be custom-made, far more detailed than mass-produced souvenirs. But as I worked through the collection, I began to notice something disturbing. Some of the snow globes contained scenes that seemed too realistic, too specific. One showed a small-town main street that looked exactly like Whitmore's downtown, complete with the same storefronts and street layout. Another depicted a Victorian house that was unmistakably the Frost residence itself, down to the tower room and surrounding pines. And in several of the globes there were people, not generic figures but detailed miniatures with individual faces, expressions, clothing. In the globe showing the Frost house, a tiny woman stood at an upstairs window, her face pressed against the glass, her mouth open as if screaming. "Mr. Pemberton," I called out, "did Margaret commission custom snow globes? Some of these are incredibly detailed." He appeared in the doorway, looking pale. "I don't know. The collection was her private obsession. She didn't allow visitors, didn't talk about it. We only discovered the extent of it after she died." "How did she die?" He hesitated. "She was found in the tower room, frozen, hypothermia. But the strange thing was, it was a warm day, unseasonably warm for December. The windows were closed, the heat was on. There was no reason for her to freeze to death." A chill ran down my spine, but I pushed it aside. There had to be a logical explanation. Medical condition, faulty heating, something. I continued cataloging, working my way to the second floor. The master bedroom contained the largest concentration of snow globes, hundreds of them arranged on custom shelving that covered 3 walls. These were different from the downstairs collection, darker. The scenes depicted winters that looked harsh and hostile, abandoned towns buried in snow, frozen forests with skeletal trees, empty houses with broken windows. And the people in these globes looked wrong. Their proportions were slightly off, their positions unnatural, as if they'd been frozen mid-movement in postures that defied normal human anatomy. In one globe, a family sat around a Christmas dinner table, but their heads were all turned at the same angle toward the window, their faces showing expressions of terror. I photographed each one, taking notes on condition and estimated value, but my hands started shaking and I found myself hurrying through the work, eager to finish and leave. The tower room was the last space I needed to catalog. Pemberton had told me it contained Margaret's most prized pieces, the ones she'd kept separate from the rest of the collection. The door was locked, and it took me 10 minutes to find the key hidden in a drawer downstairs. The tower room was small, perhaps 10 feet in diameter, with windows on all sides providing a panoramic view of the surrounding property. In the center of the room was a circular table, and on that table sat 12 snow globes, each approximately 8 inches tall, arranged like hours on a clock face. These were different from all the others. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, almost impossibly detailed. Each contained a complete miniature world, not just a simple scene, but entire environments with depth and dimension that seemed to extend far beyond the physical boundaries of the glass sphere. I approached the table slowly, drawn by a fascination that overrode my growing unease. The globe at the 12 o'clock position showed a perfect recreation of Whitmore's town square on Christmas Eve. I could see individual bricks in the buildings, tiny wreaths on doors, even readable text on shop signs. And there were people, dozens of them, caught in various activities. Shopping, talking, walking. Their faces were distinct, individual, remarkably lifelike, too lifelike. I leaned closer, studying one particular figure, a woman carrying shopping bags, her face turned upward as if looking at snow falling from the sky. The detail was phenomenal. I could see the pattern on her scarf, the individual strands of her hair, even what looked like a reflection in her eyes. Then she moved. It was subtle, barely perceptible. A slight turn of her head, a small adjustment of her grip on the shopping bags. But I saw it. I was certain I saw it. I jerked back from the table, my heart pounding. No, that was impossible. It must have been a trick of the light, a shadow, my tired eyes playing tricks. Snow globes don't move on their own. The figures inside are fixed, static. But I couldn't shake the image from my mind. I pulled out my phone and took several photographs of the globe, zooming in on that particular figure. In the photos, she was in a slightly different position than I remembered, her head at a different angle. I checked the other globes. Each one depicted a different season and setting, but all maintained that same extraordinary level of detail. Spring gardens, summer beaches, autumn forests, winter mountains. And in each one there were people, perfectly rendered miniature people going about mundane activities. The globe at the 3:00 position showed a house in winter, snow piled high around its foundation. Through the windows I could see a family inside, parents and 2 children gathered around a Christmas tree. The detail was so precise that I could see expressions on their faces, presents under the tree, even the pattern on the wallpaper. And then I recognized the house. It was the Frost residence. This exact house. The family inside was positioned in the living room directly below me, in the same layout, with the same furniture I'd seen downstairs. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Francis checking on my progress. "I'm almost done with the catalog," I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. "But Francis, some of these snow globes are unusual. I think they might be worth getting an expert to look at them before we move them." "What do you mean, unusual?" "They're incredibly detailed, almost too detailed. And some of them depict real locations, real buildings. I think Margaret might have commissioned them from a master craftsman." "Just finish the catalog and get them loaded," Francis said, impatient. "I have buyers interested in the collection sight unseen." Apparently, Margaret was known in collector circles. "We need to move quickly before Christmas." After he hung up, I turned back to the 12 globes. Something about them felt fundamentally wrong, but I couldn't articulate exactly what. They were beautiful, mesmerizing even, but they filled me with a deep, instinctive dread. I took detailed photographs of each one, making notes about the scenes depicted. As I worked my way around the table, I noticed something disturbing. Several of the globes showed the same locations at different times: Whitmore's town square in spring, summer, fall, and winter. But the people in them were different, wearing period clothing from different decades. It was as if Margaret had captured the same place across multiple timelines. The globe at the 9:00 position stopped me cold. It showed this exact room, the tower room, with the same circular table and 12 snow globes arranged on it. And standing at the table, looking down at the globes, was a figure I recognized immediately. It was me. The miniature Jennifer inside the globe wore the same clothes I had on, the same jacket, the same boots. Her face was turned toward one particular globe, the one at 12:00, and her expression showed a mixture of fascination and horror that I could feel reflected in my own features at that moment. I backed away from the table, my mind reeling. This was impossible. These globes had been here for years, according to Pemberton. Margaret had died weeks ago. There was no way one of them could depict me in this room wearing these clothes at this exact moment, unless it wasn't depicting the present, unless it was depicting the future, or the past, or some moment outside of normal time that existed in perpetual present tense within the glass. I tried to leave the room, but I couldn't. My feet wouldn't move toward the door. Instead, I found myself drawn back to the table, back to the globes, compelled by something I didn't understand. I picked up the globe showing Whitmore's Christmas Eve square, cradling it carefully in my hands. The weight was wrong. It was too heavy for its size, as if it contained more than just glass and water and a miniature scene. And when I looked closely at the liquid inside, I realized it wasn't water. It was too thick, too viscous, and it moved in slow, syrupy waves that defied normal fluid dynamics. I tilted the globe, watching the fake snow swirl. But it wasn't swirling randomly. The snow was forming patterns, shapes, almost like words written in white against the scene below. I turned the globe slowly, trying to read what it was saying. "Help us." The words dissolved and reformed. "Trapped, cold, please." My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the globe. I set it back on the table, but the damage was done. I'd seen the message, and now I couldn't unsee it. I checked the other globes, tilting each one carefully. Every single one contained the same phenomenon. The snow inside wasn't random, it was language, desperate pleas spelling out messages that appeared and disappeared as the particles swirled. "We're still here. She put us inside, can't get out, so cold forever. Please break the glass." I stumbled backward, knocking against the table. Several globes rocked dangerously but didn't fall. My rational mind tried to explain it away. Pareidolia, seeing patterns where none existed, my imagination running wild. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew those were deliberate messages. I ran from the tower room down the stairs, searching for Pemberton. I found him in the study, going through paperwork with a dazed expression. "We need to leave," I told him. "Something is very wrong with those snow globes. I think Margaret was doing something to them, something to the people in them." "What people?" he interrupted. "They're just figurines, miniatures." "No, they're not. I saw them move. I saw messages in the snow. Mr. Pemberton, I think there are actual people trapped inside those globes." He stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I believe you." "You do?" "I've been in this house for 3 days," he said quietly, cataloging her possessions, going through her papers. "I found her journals, Jennifer. Margaret's journals from the last 60 years. She was obsessed with the idea of preserving perfect moments, keeping people safe from death and tragedy by capturing them in miniature worlds where nothing bad could ever happen." "That's insane." "Yes, but she found a way to do it. I don't understand the mechanics, don't understand if it was magic or science or something in between. But she developed a method. She would observe someone, study them, and then she would create a snow globe capturing that person at a specific moment. And somehow, some part of them would become bound to the globe. Not their body, their consciousness, their soul, whatever you want to call it. I felt sick. How many people? I don't know. Dozens at least, maybe hundreds. She started after her daughter died, trying to bring her back. That first snow globe is in the tower room, the one showing a young girl playing in the snow. That's her daughter, Sarah. Margaret managed to capture some essence of her, but she could never bring her back fully. So she kept trying, kept collecting more people, thinking that if she gathered enough souls, enough preserved moments, she could somehow reverse death itself. "We have to destroy them," I said. "We have to break the globes and free whoever's inside." "No!" Pemberton grabbed my arm. "We can't. I tried to break one yesterday. The moment the glass shattered, the temperature in the room dropped 50 degrees instantly. I heard screaming, saw shadows moving. Whatever is in those globes, releasing them doesn't free them, it unleashes them." We stood in silence, the horror of the situation sinking in. Thousands of snow globes throughout the house, each potentially containing a trapped soul, and no way to free them without catastrophic consequences. "What do we do?" I finally asked. "I don't know. I contacted the family lawyer's office in Boston, but they think I'm crazy. I have no authority to destroy the property, and if I try to, I'll be liable for the full value of the collection. We're trapped as surely as the people in those globes. A sound from upstairs made us both freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crossing the floor of the tower room. But we were the only people in the house. "She's still here," Pemberton whispered. "Margaret. I've heard her every night walking through the house checking on her collection. I don't think she realizes she's dead. Or maybe she does and she's trapped like the rest of them, bound to this place by her obsession." The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and began descending. We could hear them clearly, measured, purposeful steps coming down toward the first floor. I didn't wait to see what appeared. I ran for the front door, Pemberton right behind me. We burst out into the late afternoon light, gasping as if we'd been underwater. The December air felt warm compared to the supernatural cold inside the house. "I'm not going back in there," I said. "I'll quit the job, pay whatever penalties. I'm not touching those globes." Pemberton nodded, his face ashen. "I'm leaving too. I'll file a report with the court, explain that the estate requires specialists. It's not technically abandoning my duties, it's requesting appropriate resources." We walked to our vehicles parked in the circular driveway. As I opened my truck door, I glanced back at the house. In the tower room window, I saw a figure standing, watching us. It was too distant to make out details, but I knew who it was. Margaret Frost, still watching over her collection, still trying to preserve perfect moments in a world where perfection doesn't exist. I drove away from that house faster than I should have, not looking back. That night, safe in my apartment, I reviewed the photographs I'd taken. Every single image of the snow globes showed the same disturbing detail. In each globe, at least one figure was looking directly at the camera, directly at me, with expressions of desperate pleading. 3 days later, on December 21st, I received a call from Francis. The Frost house had burned down the night before. Electrical fire, according to initial reports, though investigators were puzzled by the fact that the temperature inside the house had been well below freezing despite the fire's heat. Nothing was salvageable. The entire collection of snow globes was destroyed. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt dread. Because that night and every night since, I've heard sounds in my apartment. Footsteps, whispering voices, the tinkling sound of breaking glass. And when I look out my window at the winter sky, I sometimes see snow falling upward, forming patterns and words before dissolving into the night. Yesterday, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a snow globe. It shows a woman sitting in an apartment, staring at a laptop, working late into the night. The detail is extraordinary. I can see the individual books on the shelves, the pattern on the couch, even the view through the windows. The woman looks exactly like me. I haven't shaken it yet. I'm afraid of what messages might be written in the snow. But every hour I see the figure inside shift slightly, moving through a looped sequence of actions. Typing, looking up, reaching for a coffee mug, typing again. Living out the same moment repeatedly, trapped in glass and fake snow and liquid that's too thick to be water. I don't know if I'm looking at my future or if the globe somehow created it. I don't know if breaking it would free me or doom me. All I know is that somewhere in the world, Margaret Frost's techniques survived. Someone else learned her methods and they're continuing her work. The fire didn't end anything. It just scattered the collection, sending pieces of it out into the world like seeds. And now those seeds are growing, taking root in new soil, creating new collections. I keep the globe on my desk where I can watch it, where I can watch myself trapped in miniature, living out the same actions over and over. Sometimes I think I can see the tiny Jennifer's mouth moving as if she's trying to say something. Sometimes I think I can read her lips. She's saying my name. She's warning me. But about what? I don't know. Maybe about the cold that's been creeping into my apartment despite the heater running constantly. Maybe about the way time seems to loop sometimes, the way I find myself repeating the same actions without realizing it until minutes later. Or maybe she's warning me about the knock that's coming at my door. The knock I heard in a dream last night, though I wasn't sure if I was really asleep. The knock that will come from someone who wants to add me to their collection, who wants to preserve me in a perfect moment where tragedy can never touch me. Because that's what collectors do. They find beautiful things and lock them away forever, calling it protection when it's really just another form of death. The snow is falling inside my apartment now, though all the windows are closed. It's not real snow. It's too uniform, too perfect, moving in patterns that suggest intelligence and purpose. And in the swirls, I can read messages forming and dissolving. Your turn. Time to sleep. Perfect forever. Welcome home. The temperature is dropping. My breath fogs in the air. And when I look at my hands, they're starting to look less real somehow. Less solid, as if I'm becoming something that could fit inside a glass sphere. Preserved and perfect and frozen in eternal December. I'm writing this as a warning. If you ever encounter Margaret Frost's snow globes or anything like them, don't touch them, don't look too closely, don't let yourself become fascinated by the detail and the craftsmanship. Because that fascination is the first step toward becoming part of the collection. And collections always want to grow. The knock is at my door now. I can hear it, though I know the door's locked and my neighbors aren't home. 3 slow knocks, perfectly spaced, patient and inevitable. I'm not going to answer it. But I don't think that matters. The collector always gets their prize. The snow is so thick now I can barely see my laptop screen, but I can see the snow globe perfectly. The tiny Jennifer inside has stopped moving. She's sitting perfectly still, staring out of the glass, her face showing an expression I recognize because I can feel it on my own face right now. Not fear, not anymore. Just acceptance of the perfect frozen moment where she'll live forever. Where I'll live forever. Where we're already living, have always been living. We'll always live in the eternal snow of Margaret Frost's cold, perfect world. Story 3. The Carolers of Pine Ridge. My name is Thomas Brennan, and I used to believe that Christmas was the most wonderful time of the year. I grew up with that conviction, celebrating the holiday with all the traditional joy and warmth it was supposed to represent. But after what happened in Pine Ridge, Colorado in December 2018, I can't hear Christmas carols without feeling a cold terror that settles deep in my bones and refuses to leave. I was working as a regional delivery supervisor for a logistics company, managing routes across the Rocky Mountain region. Part of my job involved checking on remote distribution points, ensuring they were properly staffed and supplied during the busy holiday season. Pine Ridge was one of the smallest facilities on my route, just a 2-person operation serving a town of 800 people and the surrounding ranches. The facility manager, a man named Douglas, called me on December 19th, his voice tight with strain. "Tom, we need you to come up here. Something's wrong. We keep getting these delivery requests to addresses that don't exist, and there are people. There are people singing outside every night. They won't leave. They just stand there singing the same carols over and over, and..." The line went dead. I tried calling back, but the phone just rang endlessly. I checked my computer. Pine Ridge's facility was showing normal operational status, no emergency flags, no system alerts. But Douglas's call had been genuinely frightened, and in 7 years of working together, I'd never heard him sound like that. I made the decision to drive up immediately. Pine Ridge was 4 hours from Denver, the last hour on increasingly remote mountain roads. I loaded my truck, a Ford F-250 equipped for mountain driving, with emergency supplies and headed out at 3 p.m. Planning to arrive before dark, the drive started normally enough. Clear roads, light traffic, the kind of cold but beautiful winter day that makes mountain driving almost pleasant. I passed through several small towns, each decorated for Christmas with strings of lights and festive displays. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary. I turned onto Highway 143 around 5 p.m., beginning the final stretch into the mountains. The sun was setting early this time of year, and shadows were already lengthening across the snow-covered landscape. The radio began to fade as I climbed elevation, stations dropping out one by one until I was left with static and the occasional burst of fragmented audio. That's when I first heard the singing. It came through the radio static crystal clear despite the poor reception. Voices, dozens of them, maybe more, singing Silent Night in perfect harmony. But something about the voices was wrong. They were too synchronized, too precise, lacking the natural variations and imperfections of human performance. It sounded more like a recording played in unison by multiple sources rather than an actual choir. The song ended, and after a brief pause, another carol began. "O come all ye faithful." Same perfect harmony, same unsettling precision. I tried changing stations, but every frequency played the same broadcast. Even the static-heavy AM channels carried the singing, as if it were being transmitted from every radio tower in the region simultaneously. I turned off the radio, but I could still hear it faintly. Not from the speakers, they were definitely off, but from outside the truck. Distant voices carrying through the mountain air, singing carols with that same eerie perfection. The GPS guidance sent me onto a smaller road, barely 2 lanes wide, that wound through dense pine forest. Snow was piled high on either side, and the encroaching darkness made it difficult to see more than 50 feet ahead. My headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating a tunnel of trees that seemed to press closer with each mile. Pine Ridge appeared suddenly, emerging from the forest like something from a vintage Christmas card. It was a small town, maybe 40 buildings total, arranged along a main street with a church at one end and what looked like a general store at the other. Every structure was decorated for Christmas, wreaths on doors, lights strung along roof lines, garland wrapped around street lamps. But something was immediately, fundamentally wrong. The town was too quiet. No vehicles moved on the streets. No smoke rose from chimneys despite the freezing temperature. No lights showed in windows except for the Christmas decorations, which glowed with an intensity that seemed unnatural in the gathering darkness. And standing in the town square, arranged in neat rows like a formal choir, were approximately 60 people. They faced the church, their backs to me, and they were singing "Joy to the World" in that same perfect, inhuman harmony. I slowed my truck to a crawl, approaching cautiously. The singers wore winter clothes, coats, scarves, hats, but despite the sub-freezing temperature, they stood perfectly still, not stamping their feet or hugging themselves for warmth. They didn't move at all except for their jaws opening and closing in sync as they sang. I pulled up to the distribution facility, a small building on the edge of town. The lights were on inside, and I could see Douglas through the window pacing back and forth with agitated movements. His face showed profound relief when he saw my truck. He burst out the door before I'd even shut off the engine. "Thank God you're here. We have to leave right now. We have to..." A voice from the choir, impossibly loud, cutting through Douglas's words like a blade, called out, "Thomas Brennan, welcome to Pine Ridge. Join us for caroling. Join us in celebration. Join us forever." I spun toward the square. The entire choir had turned to face us. 60 people staring with wide, unblinking eyes that reflected the Christmas lights with an oily sheen. Their mouths hung open in identical expressions, and when they began singing again, "Hark the herald angels sing," their jaws moved in perfect synchronization, as if controlled by a single mind. Douglas grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. Don't listen to the words, don't really listen, that's how they get you. The lyrics are wrong, Tom, they're singing something else. Something hidden in the melody. I focused on the singing, and he was right. Underneath the familiar carol, there were other words, a counter-melody that didn't quite match the traditional lyrics. I couldn't make them out clearly, but they sent chills down my spine, something about joining, about becoming one, about eternal celebration. Where's everyone else? I asked. Where's the rest of the town? They're all here, Douglas whispered, nodding toward the choir. That's everyone. Every person who lived in Pine Ridge. They started gathering 3 nights ago. First, it was just a few people singing outside the facility. Then more joined. Then more. By last night, it was everyone, and they won't stop. They sing all day, all night, never sleeping, never eating, just singing. We need to call for help. Phones don't work, radio either. And the road out of town. He trailed off, looking toward the way I'd driven in. Others have tried to leave, they don't get far. As if on cue, the choir finished their carol and began another. We wish you a Merry Christmas. But the hidden lyrics were clearer now, more prominent, and I could make out fragments. Join our song. Become the music. Sing forever in harmony. Never alone again. A woman stepped forward from the choir. She was elderly, perhaps 70, wearing a bright red coat and a knitted scarf. Her face was familiar in the way that people from small towns often look. Generic, wholesome, the kind of grandmother you'd see in holiday advertisements. But her eyes were wrong, too wide and too bright, and when she smiled, her mouth opened far wider than it should. Mr. Brennan, she said, her voice carrying easily across the distance despite not raising her volume. We've been expecting you. Douglas requested assistance and you answered the call. How very kind, how very helpful. Who are you? I demanded. I'm everyone. We're everyone. We're Pine Ridge, Thomas. All of us together, united in song, celebrating Christmas as it was meant to be celebrated. Forever and ever and ever. The choir began moving forward, walking in perfect lockstep, their feet hitting the ground simultaneously. They continued singing, the hidden lyrics growing stronger. Join us. Join us, join us forever, never alone again, together in harmony, perfect celebration. Douglas pulled me toward the facility. Inside, now. They can't come inside. Not yet. We ran into the building and Douglas slammed the door behind us, throwing multiple locks. The singing grew louder and through the windows I could see the choir surrounding the building. Their faces pressed against the glass, mouths moving in that horrible synchronization. How long have they been like this? I asked. 3 days. It started during the Christmas concert at the church. They were practicing for a holiday performance, just a normal church choir of maybe 20 people. Then something happened. I don't know what. I wasn't there, but people say the music changed. The melody shifted into something else, something older than Christmas carols. And the singers couldn't stop. They kept going, kept singing, and then others started joining them. Walking out of their homes, leaving their families, adding their voices to the choir. By the next morning, half the town was standing in the square singing. By the evening, it was everyone except me and the sheriff. Where's the sheriff now? Douglas's face crumpled. He tried to arrest them, walked into the middle of the choir to break it up. They touched him, Tom, just placed their hands on his shoulders, and he started singing with them. His voice joined theirs instantly, perfectly harmonized, and his eyes went wide like theirs, and now he's just another voice in the choir. The singing outside shifted to "Oh Holy Night," but the hidden lyrics were now completely clear, no longer subtle or hidden. Become the music. Let the song consume you. Surrender your voice to the eternal chorus. Sing until your throat bleeds. Sing until your mind breaks. Sing forever in perfect harmony. I covered my ears, but the sound penetrated anyway, vibrating through my skull. Douglas was doing the same. Both of us crouched in the middle of the room trying to block out the infectious melody. "We have to get out of here," I said. "My truck. We'll drive straight through them if we have to." Others tried that. The Johnsons, a family with 3 kids, they got about 2 miles out of town before the singing started coming from inside their car, from their own mouths. They turned around and drove back, all 5 of them singing the same song, and parked in the square and joined the choir. There has to be a way. Douglas pulled out a worn notebook. "I've been researching. The church has records going back to when Pine Ridge was founded in 1887. There was an incident then during the first Christmas celebration. A traveling preacher came through, said he knew sacred songs that could unite a community in perfect harmony. He taught the townspeople these songs, and they sang them during Christmas Eve service. The singing didn't stop for 6 days. People sang until they collapsed, until their voices gave out, until several died from exhaustion. The survivors managed to burn the preacher's songbook and bury him outside town. The singing stopped. But according to the records, every few decades someone finds fragments of those songs. They start singing them, and it begins again. How do we stop it this time? I don't know. The songbook is gone, the preacher is long dead. But something about this place remembers. The town itself remembers the songs, and Christmas brings them back, and they spread like a virus through anyone who listens. The choir outside had grown louder, more insistent. I risked looking through the window. They were standing shoulder to shoulder now, a solid wall of singers surrounding the building. And behind them I could see something that made my blood run cold. More people were arriving. Walking out of the forest, emerging from the shadows, joining the choir. But these people weren't from Pine Ridge. I recognized some of them. Travelers from other towns, delivery drivers I'd seen at other facilities, even a highway patrol officer I knew worked routes 50 miles away. They'd all been drawn by the singing, called to join the eternal Christmas celebration. "It's spreading," I whispered. "They're not just singing to keep themselves going, they're singing to attract others. It's expanding beyond Pine Ridge." Douglas nodded grimly. "By Christmas Day, it'll reach the nearest city. Within a week, half of Colorado. The songs want to grow, Tom. They want everyone to join. They want the whole world singing these carols forever. We needed a plan." I examined the facility's layout. We were in the main office area with a warehouse section in the back and a loading dock facing away from the town square. If we could get to my truck without being touched by the choir, we might have a chance. But as I formulated this plan, I realized I was humming. Just a quiet melody under my breath, barely audible. And the melody was Silent Night, but with those other words, those hidden lyrics about joining and becoming one and singing forever. Douglas noticed. His face went pale. "Tom, stop humming." I clamped my mouth shut, but the melody continued in my head. I'd heard too much. The songs were inside me now, trying to find voice, trying to add me to the choir. "How long?" I asked. "Until you can't resist? Hours, maybe. Once it's in your head, it doesn't leave. You'll start singing out loud eventually. You won't be able to stop yourself. Then we move now before I'm completely infected." We gathered supplies quickly, flashlights, emergency flares, everything I had in my truck. Douglas grabbed a box of old cassette tapes from the office. "Music," he explained. "Different music. Maybe if we flood our heads with other songs, we can drown out the carols." We made our way to the loading dock. Through the narrow windows, we could see the back area was less crowded. Only a dozen singers instead of the full choir. They swayed gently, mouths open, that terrible harmonized sound continuing without pause. "On 3, I said. "We run for the truck. Don't let them touch you. Don't listen if you can help it. Just run." We burst through the loading dock door, sprinting across the snow-covered parking area. The singers immediately began moving toward us, their lockstep coordination breaking as they converged from multiple directions. But they moved slowly, restricted by their need to maintain the song, their mouths never closing, the melody never breaking. I reached my truck first, keys already in hand. Douglas was right behind me. I could hear him starting to hum, his mouth trying to form the words even as he fought against it. I shoved him into the passenger seat and threw myself behind the wheel. Hands slapped against the windows, faces pressed against the glass, mouths open impossibly wide. Singing that horrible, perfect harmony. The truck rocked as more singers surrounded us, their combined weight making the vehicle shudder. I started the engine and slammed into reverse, scattering several singers. They didn't cry out when they fell, they just kept singing, lying in the snow with their mouths open to the sky, adding their voices to the eternal chorus. I shifted into drive and accelerated toward the road out of town. The singers didn't try to block us. They simply stood in their formation, watching us go, their song following our truck like a physical presence. We made it half a mile before Douglas started singing out loud. "No," he gasped between verses. "No, I don't want to. I'm trying to stop, but I can't." His voice joined the melody perfectly, harmonizing with the distant choir, adding a new part to their endless song. Tears streamed down his face, but his mouth kept moving, the words pouring out against his will. I fumbled with the cassette player, shoving in one of the tapes. Heavy metal blasted through the speakers, aggressive and discordant, as different from Christmas carols as possible. Douglas's singing faltered slightly, but didn't stop. The carols were too strong, too deeply embedded. 2 miles from town, my headlights illuminated something that made me brake hard. There were people standing across the road, not a small group, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, stretching back into the forest as far as I could see, all singing, all swaying in perfect unison, all staring at our approaching truck with those wide, oil-slick eyes. I recognized faces in the crowd, people from Denver, travelers from out of state, children who'd been at rest stops along the highway. The songs had spread faster than I'd imagined, calling people from miles around, adding them to the growing chorus. And they were forming words with their bodies, arranging themselves in patterns that spelled out a message I could read even from a distance. "Come home, Thomas. Sing with us. Christmas forever." I couldn't go forward. I couldn't go back. The choir from Pine Ridge was walking up the road behind us, a wall of singers closing in from that direction. We were trapped between two parts of the same growing organism, a chorus that wanted to consume the world. Douglas's singing grew louder, more insistent. His body started rocking, keeping time with the distant choir. "Tom," he managed to say between lyrics, "you have to stop me. Stop them." An idea formed, desperate and probably futile. The church. Douglas had said the original preacher was buried outside the church, his body and his teachings interred in an attempt to end the singing. Maybe that site held something, some remnant of power or knowledge that could help. I spun the truck around, driving off-road through the forest, trees scraping against the sides as I forced my way between them. The singing grew more agitated, the melody shifting to something more aggressive. The hidden lyrics changed. "Don't run. Come back. Join us. You cannot escape the song." I reached Pine Ridge by cutting through the forest and emerging near the church. The main body of the choir was still on the road, giving me a narrow window. I dragged Douglas from the truck. He was singing continuously now, his voice hoarse but never stopping, and pulled him toward the church. The door was unlocked. Inside, the church was decorated for Christmas. A tree in the corner, wreaths on the pews, candles arranged on the altar. But everything was covered in dust, as if decades had passed since anyone had truly maintained the space. I found what I was looking for behind the altar, a small door leading to a basement. The church records Douglas had mentioned would be down there, and possibly more information about the original preacher and his songs. The basement was cramped and cold, filled with boxes of documents and old furniture. Douglas collapsed against the stairs, still singing, his body shaking with the effort of fighting against the compulsion. I tore through boxes frantically, looking for anything that might help. I found the original church register from 1887. The preacher's name had been crossed out, scratched over so many times it was illegible. But there was a notation in the margin, written in shaky handwriting. The songs are older than Christmas, older than Christ. They predate human civilization. He claimed they were the first sounds, the original harmonies that formed reality. To sing them is to merge with creation itself. We buried him, but the songs remain. They live in the stones of this church, in the very ground of Pine Ridge. They will resurface. They always resurface. I heard footsteps upstairs. The choir had arrived. Their singing filled the church, echoing through the space, growing louder and more overwhelming. Douglas began standing, still singing, drawn toward the sound of his fellow choristers. I grabbed his arm. "Douglas, fight it! You have to help me figure this out." But his eyes had taken on that same wide, glassy look. He pulled away from me and began walking toward the stairs, toward the singing, toward the eternal Christmas celebration that would never end. I was alone in the basement with records that confirmed my worst fears. The songs couldn't be stopped, only delayed. They were fundamental, primordial, woven into the fabric of existence. Christmas was just a convenient vector, a time when people gathered to sing, when the barriers between the songs and human consciousness weakened. The singing was inside my head now, fully formed, demanding release. I could feel my mouth trying to open, my throat trying to give voice to the melody. In minutes, maybe seconds, I would join Douglas upstairs. I would become part of the choir, and the songs would continue to spread until everyone on earth was singing, until human civilization was reduced to a single eternal Christmas concert with no audience, just performers singing for themselves, for each other, forever and ever. I made a choice then. If I couldn't stop the songs, I could at least prevent them from spreading further. I grabbed a can of kerosene from the basement church maintenance supplies and began pouring it over the boxes, the floor, the dry wooden beams supporting the structure. The choir was descending the stairs now, dozens of singers filling the narrow stairwell, their voices creating a physical pressure in the small space. Douglas was among them, his face showing both ecstasy and horror, trapped in a body that wouldn't stop performing. I lit a match. "I'm sorry," I said to Douglas, to all of them, "but this has to end." The fire caught quickly, spreading through the basement and racing up the stairs. The singing changed, became screams that were still somehow musical, harmonized shrieks that expressed pain and fury, and an eternal hunger to continue performing. The singers tried to retreat, but they moved slowly, their bodies still trying to maintain formation, still trying to keep the song going even as the flames consumed them. I found a small window at ground level and smashed through it, crawling out into the snow as the church erupted in flames behind me. The fire spread quickly, jumping to nearby buildings. Within an hour, all of Pine Ridge was burning, the flames visible for miles in the dark winter night. The singing didn't stop immediately. Even as the choir burned, even as their bodies were consumed, their voices continued. But gradually, one by one, the voices fell silent. By dawn, only the crackling of burning timber remained. I made my way back to the road on foot. The crowds that had been blocking my exit were gone, drawn back to Pine Ridge by the fire, by some instinct to return to the source of the songs. The roads were clear. It took me 2 days to walk to the nearest town. I was hospitalized for exposure and smoke inhalation. When authorities investigated my story, they found the remains of Pine Ridge, a burned-out shell of a town with no survivors. The official report blamed a church fire that spread quickly through the dry wooden structures. No mention of the singing, no mention of the Christmas carols that wouldn't end. I should feel guilty. I killed Douglas and 60 other people, maybe more, who'd been drawn to Pine Ridge by the songs. But I remember what I read in those church records. I remember the notation about the song spreading until everyone was singing. I saved lives, probably millions of lives, by ending it when and how I did. But the songs aren't truly gone. I hear them sometimes on quiet nights, distant harmonies that might be wind or might be something else. And every Christmas I feel the urge to hum along to carols, to add my voice to the traditional melodies. I fight it. I don't celebrate Christmas anymore, don't listen to seasonal music, avoid anything that might awaken the songs sleeping in my memory. Because I know what I really heard in that church basement, in those final moments before I set the fire. The hidden lyrics had changed one last time, becoming a message directed specifically at me. Thank you for the sacrifice. We will grow again, we will return, and next time, Thomas Brennan, you will sing with us. They're waiting for the right moment, the right Christmas, the right person to find those songs again and give them voice. And when that happens, the eternal choir will reform. And this time, there might not be anyone willing to do what I did, to burn it all down and accept the weight of that terrible necessity. I live with that knowledge every day, and every Christmas Eve at midnight, my phone rings. I never answer it. But I can hear what's on the other end, faint but clear through the connection. Perfect harmony, dozens of voices singing carols with hidden lyrics, inviting me to join them, to complete what we started in Pine Ridge. The singing is always waiting, and someday, maybe in a decade or a century, someone will answer the call. Someone will learn the songs and teach them to others. And the eternal Christmas celebration will begin again, spreading from town to town, person to person, until the whole world is singing those ancient melodies that existed before language, before thought, before anything we recognize as human. I won't live to see it, but it's coming. The songs are patient. They have all the time in the world, and somewhere in the ashes of Pine Ridge, buried beneath the ruins of that church, the original preacher's bones are still humming, keeping time, waiting for resurrection. Story 4. The Gift Exchange. My name is Rebecca Santos, and I used to work in logistics for an international shipping company coordinating the movement of packages across North America during the holiday season. December was our busiest time, with millions of gifts being transported to destinations across the continent. I'd been doing this work for 9 years, and I thought I'd seen everything: lost packages, damaged goods, the occasional customs nightmare. But in December 2020, during the height of pandemic shipping chaos, I encountered something that made me question the very nature of what we were moving and where some of those packages were really going. It started on December 14th when our tracking system flagged an anomaly. A package had been scanned at our Denver facility, logged for delivery to an address in Boise, Idaho, then scanned again 30 seconds later at a facility in Portland, Maine, over 2,000 miles away. The system registered both scans as legitimate, verified by different employees in different time zones, both swearing they'd physically handled the same package with the same tracking number. This should have been impossible. Our packages move by truck and plane, following documented routes with multiple checkpoints. They don't teleport across the country. I assumed it was a scanning error, a glitch in the system, and sent a message to both facilities requesting verification. Both facilities responded with photographs. Same package, same tracking number, same dimensions and weight. Somehow, impossibly, the package existed in 2 places simultaneously. My supervisor, a woman named Patricia, who'd been with the company for 20 years, looked at the data with visible confusion. This has never happened before, never. Our system doesn't allow for duplicate tracking numbers. Could someone have hacked the database, I suggested, and created a physical package to match? Rebecca, look at the scans. Those are real packages, really weighed, really measured. This isn't just data corruption. Over the next 3 days, more anomalies appeared. Packages that arrived at their destinations before being picked up from the sender. Deliveries made to addresses that didn't exist on any map. One tracking number that showed the same package being delivered successfully to 47 different locations on the same day. The shipping industry was already strained by pandemic-related chaos, staff shortages, delayed flights, overwhelmed facilities. These additional glitches threatened to break the entire system. But as I investigated further, I realized these weren't glitches. They were something far stranger. On December 17th, I received a call from one of our drivers, a man named Carlos who'd been with the company for 15 years. He sounded shaken, his voice tight with fear. "Rebecca, I need to report something, but I don't know how to explain it. I was making deliveries in a suburban neighborhood outside Phoenix, normal houses, normal street. But there was one address on my list that it wasn't right. The house was there, but it was also not there. Like I could see it, but my eyes wouldn't focus on it properly. Carlos, are you feeling all right? Maybe you need to take a break." "I'm fine. Listen to me." I walked up to the door to deliver the package, and when I knocked, the door opened immediately. There was a woman standing there, but Rebecca, she wasn't fully there. She was translucent, like I could see through her to the hallway behind. And her voice was wrong, like it was coming from somewhere far away, even though she was standing right in front of me. What did she say? She said, "Thank you for the delivery. Would you like to make an exchange?" I didn't know what she meant, so I just handed her the package and asked for a signature. She signed the scanner, but the signature appeared before she finished writing it. It was already there on the screen before her finger touched the device. "Carlos, there's more." She handed me a package, said it needed to be delivered, gave me an address. I told her she needed to schedule a pickup through proper channels, but she just smiled and said the package was already in the system. And Rebecca, when I got back to my truck, the package was there, in my delivery log, with a tracking number and everything, but I never scanned it in. It just appeared. I pulled up his route data. He was right. A new package had been added to his manifest mid-route with no corresponding pickup scan, no origin facility, no sender information. Just a tracking number and a destination address in Fairbanks, Alaska. "Don't deliver it," I told him. "Bring it back to the facility. We need to examine it." But when Carlos returned to the Phoenix facility, the package was gone from his truck. According to the tracking system, it had been delivered successfully to the Fairbanks address 3 hours earlier, while Carlos was still driving around Phoenix. Someone else had signed for it, a name that appeared in our database but wasn't attributed to any real person. The anomalies were accelerating. By December 20th, we had over 300 flagged packages exhibiting impossible behavior. They appeared and disappeared from our system. They existed in multiple locations. They were delivered to addresses that shouldn't exist, signed for by people who weren't there. Patricia called an emergency meeting with regional supervisors. "We have a major problem. Either our entire tracking infrastructure has been compromised or something else is happening, something we don't understand." One of the other supervisors, an older man named Gerald, spoke up. "I've been researching historical records. This isn't the first time this has happened. Back in 1952, during a particularly heavy Christmas shipping season, there were reports of similar anomalies. Packages appearing in impossible locations, deliveries to addresses that didn't exist. The company buried the reports, chalked it up to Cold War paranoia and clerical errors. but I found internal memos suggesting they knew it was something else. What do you mean, something else? Gerald pulled out a folder of documents, photocopies of decades-old memos and reports. They called it the gift exchange. The theory was that during Christmas, when billions of packages are in transit simultaneously, when the sheer volume of human intention and desire is focused on giving and receiving, something happens to the space through which these packages move. They theorized that the shipping infrastructure, the trucks, planes, warehouses, the entire system, becomes a kind of parallel dimension where normal rules don't apply. That's insane, Patricia said. Is it? We move packages through a network that spans the entire world. Millions of objects in constant motion, each tagged with data, each connected to desires and expectations. What if that network becomes its own kind of reality during peak season? What if the packages aren't moving through space in the normal way anymore? I thought about the translucent woman Carlos had described, the house that existed and didn't exist simultaneously. The gift exchange, I said slowly. The woman asked Carlos if he wanted to make an exchange. What if these anomalies are packages moving between our world and somewhere else? Another layer of reality that exists specifically for the purpose of delivering gifts? The room fell silent. The idea was absurd, impossible, contradictory to everything we understood about physics and reality. But it explained the data better than any other hypothesis. If this is true, I continued, then these anomalous packages might be gifts intended for recipients in that other reality. And the packages they send back, the ones appearing in our system with no origin point, those might be gifts intended for people in our world. From who? Patricia asked. Who's sending gifts from this supposed other dimension? No one had an answer. That evening, I stayed late at the office, reviewing the data on every anomalous package we'd flagged. I was looking for patterns, anything that might help us understand what was happening. Most of the packages were standard: clothes, electronics, toys, books. Normal Christmas gifts, but a few stood out. One package, tracking number AX2D847DE20, had been logged at 17 different facilities simultaneously on December 18th. The recipient name was listed as the recipient who waits between. The address was 47 Neverwhere Lane, the town adjacent, ER00000. Obviously fake, obviously impossible, yet 17 of our employees had scanned it, weighed it, and confirmed its existence. I pulled the photographs taken at each facility. The package was identical in every image, a medium-sized box wrapped in plain brown paper tied with red string in an intricate knot pattern I didn't recognize. But something about the images was wrong. The package cast no shadow. In every photograph, regardless of lighting or angle, the package appeared to exist without interacting with light in a normal way. I decided to trace the package's origin. According to the system, it had been dropped off at our Seattle facility by a walk-in customer on December 15th. I called the Seattle facility manager. "Do you remember this package?" I asked, reading the tracking number. "I remember it," he said quietly. The customer who dropped it off was strange. Older woman, very polite, but something about her felt off. She paid in cash, exact amount, and when I asked for a return address, she said there wasn't one. Said the recipient would understand who it was from. Did you see her leave? That's the thing. I turned away for just a second to print the receipt, and when I looked up, she was gone. Not walking out the door, just gone. And the package was already on the counter, even though I hadn't seen her place it there. The package had been sitting in a sorting facility in Memphis for 3 days, neither moving forward in the system nor being returned to sender. I made a decision that probably violated multiple company policies. "I'm going to Memphis. I want to see this package in person." I took a red-eye flight, arriving at the Memphis facility early on December 21st. The facility was massive, one of our largest hubs, handling hundreds of thousands of packages daily during the holiday season. The supervisor there, a woman named Diane, met me in the main sorting area. "It's in secure storage," she said. "We didn't know what to do with it, so we isolated it. Rebecca, I have to tell you, my staff is refusing to handle it. They say it feels wrong, that it makes them uncomfortable." She led me to a smaller room where anomalous or damaged packages were kept. Package AX2847DEC20 sat alone on a metal shelf, exactly as it appeared in the photographs. Brown paper, red string, no shadow. I approached it slowly. The air around the package felt different, colder, denser, as if the package was affecting the space around it. When I reached out to touch it, my hand passed through a boundary that wasn't visible but was definitely there, a membrane between normal space and wherever this package truly existed. The moment my fingers made contact with the brown paper, I saw something. Not a vision exactly, more like a memory that wasn't mine. I saw a vast warehouse, infinitely large, filled with packages stacked to impossible heights. The warehouse existed in darkness, lit only by the glow emanating from the packages themselves. And moving between the stacks were figures, tall, thin, translucent shapes that might have been human once, but had become something else. Something adapted to exist in this liminal space where gifts traveled. One of the figures turned toward me, and I felt its attention like a physical weight. It spoke, though no sound was made. The words simply appeared in my mind. The exchange must continue. The balance must be maintained. Gifts given, gifts received. Both worlds benefit. Do not interfere. I jerked my hand away, gasping. Diane grabbed my arm. "What happened? You were frozen for almost a minute." "I saw where it comes from," I said. "There's a place, a warehouse between worlds. The packages move through there, and there are things there, things that facilitate the exchange." "That's impossible." "I know, but it's true. And I think they're using our infrastructure, our entire shipping network, as a gateway. During Christmas, when the volume is highest, when enough people are participating in the act of giving and receiving, the gateway opens wider. More packages move between realities." Diane stared at the package with visible fear. "What do we do with it?" "We deliver it. To an address that doesn't exist." "The address exists, just not in our world. But if we put it in a delivery truck and follow our normal procedures, I think the package will find its way. The system knows how to handle these. It's been handling them for decades, maybe longer. We just never noticed before." We loaded package AX2847DEC20 into a delivery truck along with hundreds of normal packages. I volunteered to ride along with the driver, a young man named Josh, who'd only been with the company for 6 months. He didn't know about the anomalies, didn't know what we were carrying. The route took us through suburban Memphis, making standard deliveries. Everything proceeded normally until we reached a stretch of road that wasn't on the GPS. Josh frowned at his device. "This is weird. The navigation just added a new stop. Address says 47 Neverwhere Lane." "Follow it," I said. The GPS guided us off the main road onto a side street I didn't recognize, despite having studied maps of Memphis for hours on the flight. The street was normal enough. Houses, trees, parked cars. But something about it felt transitional, as if we were no longer entirely in Memphis, but not yet somewhere else. The house at number 47 appeared gradually, fading into existence as we approached. It was a Victorian structure, well-maintained, decorated for Christmas with lights and wreaths. Smoke rose from the chimney. Everything about it seemed perfectly normal except for the fact that it hadn't been there a moment before. Josh grabbed package AX2847DEC20 and walked to the door. I followed, though every instinct told me to stay in the truck. He knocked, and the door opened immediately. A woman stood there. She was translucent, exactly as Carlos had described. Visible but not entirely present, as if we were seeing only a projection of something that existed elsewhere. She smiled warmly. "Thank you for the delivery," she said, her voice echoing slightly as if coming from a great distance. "We've been expecting this." Josh handed her the scanner. She signed, and like Carlos had reported, the signature appeared on the screen before she finished the motion. Josh, unaware of the impossibility, simply thanked her and turned to leave. But the woman looked at me, making direct eye contact. "Would you like to make an exchange?" she asked. "You've seen the warehouse. You understand now. We could use someone with your knowledge, someone who understands both worlds." "What are you?" I asked. "We're the facilitators. We've existed as long as humans have given gifts to one another. We maintain the flow, ensure the exchange continues. Your world gives, we receive. We give, your world receives. It's a necessary balance." "Why? What happens if the exchange stops?" Her smile faded. "Gifts are important, Rebecca. They represent connection, generosity, the desire to bring joy to others. These aren't trivial emotions, they're fundamental to human social bonds. When enough gifts move through the system simultaneously, they create channels between realities. Those channels allow the exchange. But if the exchange stops, if the channels close, the accumulated energy has to go somewhere. It would be catastrophic. You're saying Christmas shipping prevents some kind of dimensional collapse? In crude terms, yes. The act of giving, multiplied across billions of people, creates a stabilizing effect on reality itself. We facilitate that process. We ensure the gifts reach their destinations, whether in your world or ours. And in exchange, we send gifts back. Balance. What happens to the people in your world? Are they dead? Are they trapped? Neither. They're transitional. Some people are drawn to the space between, especially during Christmas. They exist in both worlds, partially facilitating the exchange. Some choose this. Some are called to it. You could be called, Rebecca. You have the aptitude. I felt the pull she was describing. Part of me wanted to accept, to understand this impossible system more fully, to become one of the translucent figures moving through that infinite warehouse. But I also felt terrified of losing myself, of becoming something neither fully human nor fully whatever these entities were. "I need to think about it," I said. "You have until midnight on December 25th. After that, the channels narrow again until next year. If you want to join us, leave a package at any facility with your name as both sender and recipient. We'll know. We'll come for you." She closed the door and the house began to fade. Within seconds, we were standing on an empty lot. No house, no smoke, no Christmas decorations. Just an overgrown patch of land that looked like it hadn't been developed in decades. Josh was already back at the truck, completely unaware of what had just happened. The system showed package AX2847DEC20 as successfully delivered. The tracking number was closed. Everything appeared normal in the database. I spent the next 4 days investigating the other anomalous packages. Each one led to similar experiences, addresses that existed between worlds, recipients who were translucent and wrong, offers to make an exchange. The system was handling these deliveries automatically, routing packages to impossible destinations through a network that extended beyond normal space. By Christmas Eve, I'd documented over 800 anomalous packages moving through our system, and those were just the ones flagged by our tracking software. The real number was probably in the thousands, maybe tens of thousands. A massive exchange was taking place, with gifts flowing between our reality and that liminal warehouse space, facilitated by translucent figures who'd either chosen or been called to serve as intermediaries. I was faced with a decision. I could report everything to upper management, potentially disrupting the exchange and risking whatever catastrophic consequences the woman had warned about. Or I could stay silent, allowing this impossible process to continue, knowing that our infrastructure was being used for purposes far beyond what the company understood. I chose silence. Not because I believed everything the translucent woman had said, but because I'd seen no evidence of harm. The packages were being delivered. Recipients in our world were receiving gifts, often from senders they couldn't identify. But the gifts themselves were normal, benign, sometimes remarkably thoughtful. And if the exchange really did help stabilize reality during Christmas, interfering seemed dangerous. But I kept investigating, documenting every anomaly, building a private database of information about the liminal warehouse and its facilitators. I needed to understand this system, even if I never made it public. On Christmas morning, I received a package at my apartment. It had no sender information, no postage, no tracking number. Just my name written in elegant script on brown paper, tied with red string in that intricate knot pattern. Inside was a snow globe, but not a normal one. When I looked into it, I could see the liminal warehouse, the infinite space, the glowing packages, the translucent figures moving between the stacks. And I could see myself in there, walking among the packages, facilitating the exchange, existing in that space between worlds. A note was included: "The offer remains open. You would be valuable to us, but there's no pressure. Some people are meant to stay in one world, documenting from a distance. Perhaps you're one of them. Merry Christmas, Rebecca. Thank you for your discretion." The snow globe sits on my desk now. Sometimes I shake it, watching the fake snow swirl around the scene of the warehouse. Sometimes I see the figures inside moving, going about their work of facilitating the eternal exchange of gifts between realities. I still work in logistics. I still coordinate shipping routes and track packages across the country. But now I see the system differently. I understand that every December, during those few weeks when billions of gifts move through our infrastructure, the boundaries between worlds thin. Packages slip between realities, impossible deliveries are made, and translucent figures work tirelessly to maintain the balance, ensuring that the act of giving continues to bind our world together. I've never sent that package. My name is both sender and recipient. That would signal my acceptance of their offer. But I haven't thrown away the snow globe either. It remains a possibility, a doorway I could step through if I chose. Because the truth is, I'm tempted. The idea of understanding the full scope of the exchange, of seeing all the worlds that connect through this impossible shipping network, of facilitating connections that most people don't even know exist. It calls to me. Maybe next Christmas, or the one after. Or maybe I'll stay in this world, documenting and observing, maintaining my role as the person who knows but doesn't interfere. The exchange continues either way. With or without me, every Christmas packages move between worlds, facilitated by those who exist in the spaces between. And as long as people continue giving gifts, continue expressing connection and generosity through physical objects, sent through our vast network of trucks and planes and warehouses, the channels will remain open. The balance will be maintained. And somewhere in that liminal warehouse, among the infinite stacks of glowing packages, a space is being held, reserved for Rebecca Santos should she choose to step through, waiting for her to join the facilitators, to become translucent, to exist between worlds and help maintain the eternal exchange. The offer remains open. Merry Christmas. Story 5, The Midnight Mass. My name is Father Michael O'Connor, and for 23 years I served as a Catholic priest in parishes across New England. I heard thousands of confessions, performed countless masses, and guided my parishioners through their spiritual journeys with what I believed was steadfast faith. But what happened during midnight mass on Christmas Eve 2017 in the small town of Ashford, New Hampshire, destroyed everything I thought I understood about faith, divinity, and the nature of the divine presence we invite into our churches. I'd been assigned to St. Catherine's Parish in September of that year, replacing Father Daniels, who'd retired after 40 years of service. Ashford was a small town, population barely 2,000, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and the church was the center of community life. St. Catherine's was a beautiful stone structure built in 1843 with stained glass windows depicting traditional biblical scenes and a bell tower that rose 70 feet above the surrounding buildings. The parish was welcoming, the congregation faithful and engaged. My first few months passed smoothly with nothing to suggest that anything was wrong. But as December approached, I began to notice subtle changes in the behavior of the longtime parishioners. They became anxious when I mentioned plans for midnight mass on Christmas Eve. Several people approached me privately, suggesting that we hold the service earlier, perhaps at 9 p.m. or even in the afternoon. When I asked why, they gave vague excuses, concerns about driving in snow, elderly members who couldn't stay up late, a general preference for earlier services. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been a member of the parish for 60 years, was more direct. "Father, you're new here. You don't understand our traditions. We don't hold midnight mass at St. Catherine's. We never have, not in all the years I've attended this church." I checked the parish records. She was wrong. Midnight mass had been held regularly until 1982, then stopped abruptly with no explanation in the documentation. Father Daniels, who I'd met briefly during the transition, had simply marked no midnight service in the calendar every year without noting a reason. When I called him to ask about this, his response was evasive. "Michael, some traditions exist for good reasons, even if those reasons aren't immediately clear. I'd advise you to continue the practice of holding Christmas Mass earlier in the evening." "But Father, midnight Mass is a beautiful tradition. The symbolism of welcoming Christ's birth at the stroke of midnight, the candles in the darkness, it's meaningful for many Catholics." A long silence followed. Then, "If you insist on holding midnight Mass, I can't stop you, but be careful, Michael. Pay attention to what happens. And if things begin to feel wrong, end the service immediately. Don't try to continue just because tradition says you should." His words unsettled me, but I dismissed his concerns as superstition. I was a priest of the Catholic Church, trained in theology and doctrine. I didn't believe in unexplained supernatural occurrences outside the bounds of established religious understanding. The Mass was a sacred ritual, protected by centuries of tradition and the grace of God. What could possibly go wrong? I announced that St. Catherine's would hold midnight Mass on Christmas Eve for the first time in 35 years. The response was mixed. Some younger parishioners were enthusiastic. Many older members stopped attending services altogether in the weeks leading up to Christmas, making excuse after excuse to avoid being present. By December 23rd, Mrs. Patterson made one final attempt to dissuade me. "Father, you need to understand. We stopped holding midnight Mass for a reason. Something happened in 1982. I was there. I saw what came." "What came, Mrs. Patterson?" "I can't explain it in a way that would make sense, but it wasn't God, Father. Whatever answered our call that night, whatever presence filled the church when we performed the midnight ritual, it wasn't what we intended to summon." "Mrs. Patterson, I appreciate your concern, but I don't believe in supernatural threats outside of proper theological context. The Mass is a sacred ritual that has been performed safely for nearly 2,000 years. One night at St. Catherine's won't be any different. She looked at me with profound sadness. I pray you're right, Father, but I won't be attending, and I'd advise everyone I care about to do the same. Despite the warnings, despite the clear unease of the longtime parishioners, I proceeded with my plans. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow falling, the town looking like something from a postcard. St. Catherine's was decorated beautifully. Wreaths, poinsettias, candles arranged around the altar. Everything was ready for a meaningful celebration of Christ's birth. The church began filling around 11:30 p.m. I was surprised by the turnout, nearly 100 people, though I noticed most of them were either very young or new to the parish. The longtime members, those who remembered 1982, were conspicuously absent. At 11:45 p.m. I began the service with the traditional processional. The church was beautiful in candlelight, the stained glass windows reflecting the flames and creating patterns of colored light across the walls. The congregation sang, "O come all ye faithful," with genuine enthusiasm, their voices echoing through the stone building. Everything proceeded normally through the first part of the Mass, readings from Scripture, Psalms, the homily. I spoke about the significance of Christ's birth, about light coming into darkness, about the divine taking human form to redeem humanity. The usual Christmas themes delivered with sincerity and passion. We reached the Eucharistic prayer at approximately 11:57 p.m. This is the central part of the Mass, the moment when, according to Catholic theology, the bread and wine are transformed into the actual body and blood of Christ through transubstantiation. It's a ritual I'd performed thousands of times, a moment of profound spiritual significance that forms the core of Catholic worship. I began the prayer. Father, you are holy indeed, and all creation rightly gives you praise. All life, all holiness comes from you through your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, by the working of the Holy Spirit. As I spoke these words, the temperature in the church began to drop. Rapidly, our breath became visible in the air. The candles flickered despite there being no wind. Several people in the congregation shifted uncomfortably, pulling their coats tighter. I continued. On the night he was betrayed, he took bread and gave you thanks and praise. He broke the bread, gave it to his disciples, and said, "Take this, all of you, and eat it. This is my body which will be given up for you." The church bells began to ring, all of them simultaneously, though no one was in the bell tower. The sound was deafening, overwhelming. Not the musical peal of celebration, but a chaotic cacophony that seemed designed to interrupt the ritual. People covered their ears. Some stood to leave, but the church doors had swung shut and wouldn't open despite people pulling on the handles. I raised my voice above the bells. When supper was ended, he took the cup. Again he gave you thanks and praise, gave the cup to his disciples, and said, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it. This is the cup of my blood." At the stroke of midnight, everything stopped. The bells fell silent. The candles went out, every single one extinguishing simultaneously. The church was plunged into absolute darkness, so complete that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Then light returned, but wrong. The stained glass windows were glowing, but not from external light. They were producing their own illumination, shining with an intensity that was almost painful to look at. And the scenes depicted in the windows had changed. Where there had been traditional biblical imagery, the nativity, the crucifixion, the resurrection, there were now different scenes, disturbing scenes. I saw figures that might have been human but were elongated and wrong, their proportions twisted. I saw rituals being performed around altars that resembled our own, but were made of materials that looked like bone and metal fused together. I saw crowds of worshippers with their mouths open impossibly wide, as if singing or screaming, their eyes reflecting something vast and incomprehensible. A voice spoke, It came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the stone building and through my bones, a sound that was felt as much as heard. You called. We answered. The invitation was made. The door is open. People in the congregation began screaming. Some tried again to open the doors, but they remained sealed. Others huddled in the pews, praying frantically, crossing themselves repeatedly as if the gesture could protect them from whatever was manifesting in the church. I tried to complete the consecration, thinking that finishing the ritual properly might undo whatever I'd started. This is my blood, the blood of the new and everlasting covenant. It will be shed for you and for all so that sins may be forgiven. Do this in memory of me. But the words felt wrong in my mouth. They had weight and power, yes, but that power wasn't flowing in the direction I intended. Instead of channeling divine grace, I was opening something, widening a doorway that should have remained closed. The air above the altar began to shimmer and distort. Reality itself seemed to bend, creating a space that wasn't entirely part of our world. And through that space, something was pushing, trying to manifest fully in our dimension. I saw it partially. A shape that hurt to perceive, geometry that didn't follow normal rules, angles that existed in more dimensions than my mind could process. It was vast, far too large to fit within the church, yet somehow compressing itself to fit through the opening I'd created. And it was hungry. Not for food or physical sustenance, but for worship, for belief, for the spiritual energy that congregations generate when they gather in faith. It fed on devotion, and I'd invited it to a feast. The youngest members of the congregation, those who'd been most enthusiastic about attending midnight mass, began to change. Their eyes widened, their mouths opened, and from their throats came sounds that weren't human. Words in languages I didn't recognize, prayers to entities I'd never studied in seminary. They were being used as conduits, their voices borrowed to give form to something that existed outside normal reality. An elderly woman who I didn't recognize, I was certain she hadn't been in the church when we started, appeared beside me. She wore old-fashioned clothing from decades past, and like the figure Carlos had described to Rebecca, she was slightly translucent, not entirely present. "You opened the door," she said calmly. "Just like Father Burke did in 1982. Just like Father Morrison did in 1953 and Father O'Malley in 1924, it keeps happening. Every few decades, a new priest arrives who doesn't know the history, who doesn't understand what midnight mass really summons when performed in this church." "What is it?" I gasped, staring at the thing manifesting above the altar. "An old god, older than Christ, older than Christianity. This building sits on ground that was sacred long before Catholics arrived. There was a stone circle here, a place where ancient peoples gathered for winter solstice rituals. When the church was built, it incorporated some of those stones into its foundation. The old power remained, dormant but present. And midnight mass on Christmas Eve, the darkest night of the year, the moment when one day transforms into another, it's the perfect time for that power to resurface. You didn't call God, Father. You called what lived here before God was even a concept. How do I stop it? You don't. You can only survive it. The ritual must complete. The presence must be acknowledged and given its due. Then it will return to dormancy for another generation. I won't worship a pagan deity. I won't violate my vows." She smiled sadly. "You already did when you began the consecration. The words are neutral, Father. They have power because humans believe they have power. But power doesn't have allegiance to any particular theology. You invited something holy to manifest. Something answered. Now you must complete the transaction." The thing above the altar was growing more solid, more present. I could see what might have been eyes, too many of them, arranged in patterns that suggested intelligence but not humanity. And I could feel its attention focusing on me, on the consecrated bread and wine, on the congregation frozen in terror around us. The translucent woman gestured toward the altar. Finish the prayer. Acknowledge what is manifested. Give thanks for the presence that has answered your call. Then end the Mass and dismiss the congregation. If you do this, it will accept the offering and withdraw. If you refuse, if you try to fight it or deny it, it will take what it's owed by force. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse. I was a Catholic priest. I devoted my life to serving God through the church. Completing a ritual that acknowledged this ancient, inhuman entity felt like the ultimate betrayal of everything I believed. But I looked at my congregation, people who'd trusted me, who'd come to this service because I'd assured them it would be safe and meaningful. They were terrified, some weeping, some catatonic with fear. Whatever entity I'd summoned was growing more powerful by the second, feeding on their terror and confusion. I made a choice that I still question every day. I completed the Eucharistic prayer, but I changed the words slightly. Instead of addressing the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I acknowledged the presence that has answered our call, the ancient holiness that preceded and will outlast our understanding, the power that dwells in sacred ground across all generations. The thing above the altar seemed to pulse with satisfaction. The distortion in reality intensified for a moment, and I felt something vast and alien brush against my consciousness. Not hostile, not malevolent exactly, but utterly indifferent to human concerns. We were insects to this thing, our beliefs and fears meaningless except as energy it could consume. Then it began to withdraw. The temperature rose. The stained glass windows faded back to their normal images. The church doors swung open, letting in the December cold and snow. The entity's presence diminished, compressing back through the doorway I'd opened, returning to whatever space it inhabited between manifestations. The congregation fled. They ran from the church without speaking, without looking back, desperate to escape the building and whatever had just occurred. Within minutes, I was alone, except for the translucent woman. "You handled that better than most," she said. Father Burke in 1982 refused to complete the ritual. The entity took what it was owed by consuming 15 years of his memories. He spent the rest of his life in a care facility, unable to remember anything from his ordination to that Christmas Eve. Father Morrison in 1953 tried to perform an exorcism. The entity killed him instantly. His heart simply stopped, as if the divine force that sustained him had been withdrawn. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm what's left of Sister Margaret, who witnessed the manifestation in 1924. I tried to document what happened, to warn future priests. But I couldn't leave. The entity marked me, bound me to this place. I exist here now between masses, trying to prevent others from making the same mistakes but never quite succeeding. Every few decades, a priest who doesn't know the history arrives and reopens the door. Why doesn't the church close this parish? If this keeps happening, they don't know. The church hierarchy doesn't believe these reports when they're filed. They attribute them to mental illness, hysteria, misunderstanding. And the people who experience these events rarely report them accurately. They suppress the memories, convince themselves it was mass hallucination or natural phenomena. By the next Christmas, most have rationalized what they saw into something less impossible. She began to fade, becoming even more translucent. You'll make your own choice about whether to report this, Father. But I advise you to do what previous priests have done. Close the church for midnight mass, leave no records explaining why, and hope the next priest respects the tradition without questioning it. Some doors are better left closed." She vanished completely, leaving me alone in the empty church. The consecrated bread and wine remained on the altar, transformed or not transformed, depending on whether one accepted that my modified prayer had completed the transubstantiation. I didn't know anymore. I didn't know what I believed about any of it. I left St. Catherine's that night and never returned to serve as its priest. I submitted my resignation to the diocese the day after Christmas, citing theological doubts and spiritual crisis as my reason. They didn't push for details. I spent the next 2 years in spiritual and psychological turmoil, questioning everything I'd believed about faith, divinity, and the nature of religious ritual. Eventually, I left the priesthood entirely. I couldn't reconcile what I'd experienced with Catholic theology. The entity I'd summoned wasn't a demon in the traditional sense. Demons, according to church teaching, are fallen angels, part of the cosmic narrative of God and Satan. What I'd encountered was something else entirely, something that existed outside that narrative, indifferent to it. I work now as a religious studies professor, teaching comparative religion at a small college. I study ancient belief systems, trying to understand the entity I encountered by examining what humans worshipped before the rise of modern religions. I've found disturbing consistencies, references to beings that exist in sacred places, that answer ritual calls, that feed on worship regardless of the specific theology employed. Every Christmas Eve I receive a package. No return address, no indication of sender. Inside is always the same thing, a small stone, smooth and ancient, that feels warm to the touch even in the coldest weather, and a note in handwriting that never varies. The door remains. Others will open it. You cannot prevent this. But thank you for completing the ritual with grace. I keep all the stones in a box in my office. There are 5 now, 1 for each year since 2017. I don't know who sends them or how they find me each time I move. I suspect Sister Margaret's still trapped in her translucent existence at St. Catherine's, somehow facilitating these deliveries as a reminder of what happened and what continues to happen. Because she was right. I couldn't prevent it. I contacted the diocese, tried to warn them about St. Catherine's, explained in careful academic language what existed beneath that church. They thanked me for my concern and assigned a new priest to the parish. I don't know if he's been warned. I don't know if he'll respect the tradition of avoiding midnight mass, or if he'll decide, as I did, that the tradition is superstitious and meaningless. If he holds midnight mass, the door will open again. The ancient entity will answer the call again. And another priest will face the choice I faced: complete the ritual and acknowledge what isn't God, or refuse and face the consequences. I dream about that night frequently. In my dreams, I'm back at the altar performing the consecration, and the entity manifesting above me is even larger and more terrible than I remember. It fills the entire church, fills the sky beyond the church, fills my mind with its vast, inhuman presence. And it's speaking to me in the dream, though I can never quite remember the words when I wake. But I remember the feeling those words evoke. Not terror exactly. Something stranger. The sense that this entity, this ancient force that predated human civilization, had been waiting with patient indifference for millennia. Waiting for humans to build their sacred places, to develop their rituals, to channel spiritual energy that could feed something far older and hungrier than any god we'd imagined. We think our religions protect us. We think our prayers and rituals channel divine grace, connect us to benevolent cosmic forces that care about human welfare. But what if we're wrong? What if our churches and temples are just elaborate feeding troughs, designed unconsciously to attract and nourish entities that existed long before humans developed the capacity for theological thought? What if every prayer is heard, but not by who we think is listening? These questions haunt me. I have no answers, only experiences I can't explain, memories I can't rationalize, and a box of warm stones that arrive every Christmas Eve as reminders of the night I invited something ancient into St. Catherine's and watched it feed on the faith of my congregation. The church continues. Masses are performed daily across the world. Millions of people gather in sacred spaces reciting ritual words, channeling spiritual energy toward entities they believe are God, Christ, the Holy Spirit. Most of these rituals proceed without incident. The presences that answer are benign or non-existent or genuinely divine. But some places are different. Some buildings sit on ground that was sacred for other reasons, to other peoples, for other purposes. And in those places, on certain nights when the ritual words are spoken and the congregation's faith reaches critical mass, doors open. Things answer. And those things are not always what we intended to summon. St. Catherine's in Ashford, New Hampshire continues to hold Christmas services. Just not at midnight. The tradition is maintained without explanation, passed from priest to priest as an unquestioned practice. The building looks serene from the outside, a beautiful stone church with stained glass windows that glow warmly when lit from within. But beneath the foundation, ancient stones remember rituals far older than Christianity. And every December, when the nights are longest and the barriers between worlds grow thin, something stirs in that sacred ground, something patient, something hungry, something waiting for the next priest who doesn't know the history, who doesn't respect the tradition, who decides that midnight mass should be restored to St. Catherine's calendar. When that happens, and it will happen eventually, the door will open again, and whatever answers will not be God.